Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Gard, and you're listening to A Shark's Perspective.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. I am a keynote speaker, a strategist, a shark diver, host of this show, and your chief shark officer. Work is supposed to be serious, right? I mean, after all, your boss and their bosses want you to be super serious in getting the work done. But maybe that's another reason that morale at companies is so low. Of course, the goal is to get the job done, and sure, you likely will have a few laughs with your team around you. But is humor truly part of the culture of the company that helps alleviate a lot of the pressure and helps all of the team look at work through a different perspective? After all, I've been there. I've worked with bosses who thought they were the titans of industry and yet afflicted by an illness and born without the ability to laugh. So sad. Are they forgetting that sometimes a laugh can help a team achieve more? So the question is, how can humor have a positive impact at work? Tim Gard is a certified speaking professional and a member of the Speaker Hall of Fame who teaches people to be more resilient and resourceful and coaches businesses on how to enhance productivity and employee enthusiasm. And on this episode, we will discuss federal government fraud investigative work to Hall of Fame speaker work, being funny in an MC role versus as a keynote speaker, nose whistles and flutes, how to use humor to shift perspectives, humor at home versus humor at work, comedy triggers, humor as a problem solver, chicken feet sticking out of a roller bag, how leaders can develop a positive humor plan, phrases for compliance, Britney Spears, using humor internationally, measuring humor success after the event, Leslie Nielsen movies, Seinfeld and Chappelle, and a lot more. So let's tune into a Hall of Fame humorous speaker with a shark who loves to laugh on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Tim, welcome to A Shark's Perspective. First of all, you're the only man or woman who's ever given me a free nose whistle. So obviously I had to get you on the show. But tell us a little bit, if you will, about you and your background and how you got into the funny speaking and speaking funny world.
Sure. I've been doing this now a little over 25 years. I used to be with the federal government, was with state Montana Human Services. And I was a fraud investigator for the state and found that people were burning out all around me. And I mean, it's fairly dangerous work. And I just kept going. And when the federal government hired me, I was with them long enough. That's a federal food stamp program. I got to be known as the funny Fed, which is kind of an oxymoron, I guess. And my agency would loan me to other agencies to represent or show the flag, as they call it. And I was able to laugh about the bizarre things about the programs, with not diminish any of the recipients of the programs. And finally, people started offering me money, and I really couldn't. I was just beyond my understanding about that. And I finally reached a point where I had to either resign from the government, because every time in the job I was at, if I got paid from outside agencies, I had to report it to the agency. So I wasn't compromising anything. And so anyway, it reached a point where I thought I either have to resign and do this full time or let that go and get into working for the government full time. So in 1 year, I resigned. I quit my job. I got divorced. I sold my house. I sold my truck. I think I did every stressful thing a human can do in 1 month. And I did 10 events the first year, 30 the next year. And I've maintained, anywhere from 40 to 100 events a year since then. The business has been good to me. And I primarily talk about the use of humor as a skill in anybody's business, however, whatever they're doing. I use a lot of storytelling, very funny stories, and a lot of visuals, unusual visuals. And it's just really caught on. I mean, it's not about telling jokes. It's really finding ways that you can laugh at the situation all around you. And I think it really clicked when I found it's not enough for me to be funny. It's that I can show other people how they can be funny too.
Yeah. Well, you went from fraud to food stamps to a little bit of a country music song there in your life, now to a Hall of Fame speaker. I first had the pleasure of seeing you speak as an MC. And I'm curious if you think it's easier to inject humor as an MC or as a keynote speaker.
Well, the MC job is hard, mostly because they don't get to know you. When I do MC work normally, what I like to do is I like to do a program for the group first so that they see what what I do and how my humor works. And then as an MC, they know they can trust me. For years people would say, like Toastmaster says, tell a joke at the opening. No, they don't know you, they can't really trust you. So it takes longer to build trust. So yeah, like I say, I would rather do a bit and then be an MC. And um, but there's some humor that's literally designed for those short pieces like that. And but I prefer speaking first and then being an MC.
Well, I saw you do the MC work when there were a couple of speakers that weren't, they were a little bit dry, and your humor, it alleviated everything. It was masterful. But how do you use humor in your speaking to shift people's perspectives?
Yeah, a lot of it is about we can't change the things that happen to us around us. We have to change our perception of them. And almost everybody can do that. I mean, I was in a cab going to the airport. It's the first time I've been in a cab for years. And we're into traffic downtown Denver, and the guy's hitting his hands on the dash, and he's in traffic and angry. And I said, "How long you been doing this?" 30 years. How long in Denver? 30 years. I hate to tell you this, it's going to happen again tomorrow. It's going to happen every other day. That person sets themselves up for anger and failure. There's a lot of work out there right now. If you're that miserable, do something else. Work a different shift. I exist in an environment where I have no control. The travel, and I've flown over 3 million miles, and yet I thrive in that environment because I've learned when to put my foot down, when to ask, when to demand. You learn the rules, and you just don't get angry every time something goes wrong.
Yeah, and I want to also explain to Gen Z that a cab that he just described, that's the prehistoric version of Uber to the Gen Z crowd.
And it's funny. Yeah, I had not been in one in years. It was really a different experience. Yeah.
Well, what is the difference between humor at home and humor at work? I did, stand up for several years and years ago, but I loved this question and really wanted you to kind of help explain how we employ this at work.
Most of the time when I'm hired, it's either a business who's having a professional meeting after hours or even during the day. But when people are at conferences, when people are at meetings, the same rules apply as they do if they're actually at work. So they could be in Las Vegas at 8 o'clock at night, and it's the same rules as if they were at a 9-to-5 job. And so what we say, what we do, if you couldn't say it to somebody in front of the boss or at an open meeting, you shouldn't be saying it at a conference. And a lot of people that come into the business try to bring in the humor they've used, like you doing stand-up. I have great respect for anybody that's done stand-up. It's a brutal, it's hard. And this boom, 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 is very different than corporate, where, if you're at a stand-up event and somebody heckles you, you go right for the throat.
Exactly.
At corporate, I would then step back and let their boss deal with it. If I attacked them, then the group would almost go against me. So just think of it this way: when you're doing something for a company and the employers are required to be there, you have to treat it like you would at any 9-to-5 job, regardless of time of day or where it is. The humor, if it's inappropriate at work, it's inappropriate at that conference.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when I speak, I do a fair amount of humor, but I don't do stand up, because if I did, it's a whole different ball game. Plus, I would have to have a cigarette and a glass of whiskey, and that's not good to have it at a corporate event anyway.
No, it doesn't work.
Does it work? But also, what do you say when people think about humor with things that might be too controversial, especially considering that everyone is triggered by everything these days?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to hit a safe road anymore with folks.
Well, I think first of all is, we have to never use humor to diminish anyone. That if you keep that rule cognizant, I think people can understand. The second thing is, when we make a mistake, people need to know there's a lot of rules out there that I don't know. I mean, and the rules are changing all the time. When I was a fraud investigator, I always had to prove intent. And if you're doing absence of malice, if you make a mistake, then, I would say that we apologize. I don't think we should live in fear. So first of all, I'd say it's okay to laugh at yourself. C.W. Metcalf said, laugh not with ridicule, but with acceptance of self. That's fine. Whenever we use humor to put somebody else down, and that's why jokes don't work a lot at work, because there's always somebody that's the butt of the joke. So the question is, if you have to ask yourself, should I say this? Then the answer is probably no. It's easier when in doubt, leave it out. That's my feeling on that.
So how do people, or I guess, how do you look at people when how they consider you to be their speaker? Not everyone gets it. I mean, I look sometimes when I've worked in corporate life at the stress bubble that people are in, and I realize that it's not another performance thing that's going to make their, to sharpen their tools. It may just, sometimes humor alleviates that pressure bubble and can make people perform well, can motivate them. Obviously all the things well, but how do you discuss that to help convey how humor can help a company fix the problems that they're looking for?
Well, humor is, first of all, really great problem solver. Normally when you solve a problem, you look at the most conservative solution and the most exorbitant. So it's the most costless and the most cost less, where we should be looking at the most extreme bizarre and the most conservative, and then find something in the middle. So as problem solving, it really does help people see problems in a different light. I mean, you saw my suitcase up there with the chicken feet sticking out of it.
Yeah.
My roller bag has chicken feet sticking out of it because when you put it in the overhead, if you have to put it in sideways, people would move my bag to make more room. The chicken feet would, and anyway, before I put the chicken feet in, they'd move my bag. So it's just wheels in. The bin wouldn't close. I'd have to check my bag. Since I put the chicken feet in there, it doesn't happen anymore. They see the chicken feet, they just put it back and leave it alone. Problem solved. So the first thing is, you have to be able to identify what's causing the people stress, or the group that I'm speaking for, what causes them stress, and then learn what not to say. You don't get up at a credit union and talk about their employees. They're the members. So it's speaking the language. And then the third thing is, it's coming up with things they really will do. If it's an office, I tell people a lot, at the end of the day, do your dismount like a gymnast. Let the day go, leave work at work, and leave home at home. So it's coming up with those things that people really will do. The nose flutes that you mentioned, their little plastic thing you play by blowing through your nose. It's just nothing but fun. There's nothing serious about them. And sometimes I think that's just what we need, is to just not everything be so serious for a while. But basically it's really about seeing what causes them stress and how I can give them input on it. I mean, I think that's the key, Shark.
Well, there's a lot of what we've talked about with how masterfully you help them with that. But what I'd kind of like to know as well, and I know you talk about this in one of your keynotes, but how can leaders develop a positive humor plan to motivate their team? Not everybody, some people might even be intimidated by it, because not everybody that we talk to can deliver humor the same way.
Well, I think first of all, they've got to find what things work for them. Some people are visual. Some can tell stories or jokes, and that's what they stick with. Other are visual, and they can use visual humor. If you can't tell jokes or have problem telling stories, I'd stick with the visual humor. Things that they can see, not necessarily cartoons, but you saw the Don't Bug Me glasses and some of the things that I have there on my website. That's the things I'd start with. Find what works for you. Number two would be start small. If you're having a meeting, come out and say, hey, we've got 89 things to talk about, and then stop and say, well, really, it's only one. So what you've done is you've actually helped to take the pain away. Reduce the size of your meetings and say, something like, I just did some work for a company where whenever they meet, they talk about everything that's wrong. And I said, start your meetings by telling people what they're doing right, and they all traveled. And I said, maybe have the best travel story of the week or the month or whatever it is. It's something funny that happened to them. But I said, the thing is, it doesn't always have to be so awful stressed out, angry people. Meetings don't have to be boring. They can be fun. And that's where I'd start, is the end of the boring meeting.
Agreed. I work with a lot of type A's that are as bad as me, and sometimes it's hard to get them to think that way. But one of the things I'd love to dive into is I'd love for you to give us an example of how you use neuroscience and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and humor to help teams with sort of easy to remember phrases that can also help improve compliance.
Sure. One of the things I do is I let people know when some little things happen, you just, you touch your forehead with your hand and wave it off and say bummer, and I'll get the whole group to go and put their hand there and then wave it off and say bummer. What it does is it releases when something happens, you either can take it and stack it up one on top of another, or you can let them go so that you don't stack them up. And then the other one is whenever something good happens, you've got to celebrate it. You go, woohoo, you woo. And for both of them, sometimes you just do it in your mind. I mean, if your boss walks in your office, I don't want you going bummer. That's not what I mean.
All right.
I'm just saying that neurolinguistically, our brains don't know the difference sometimes with what's real and what's not real. So if you tell yourself, I'm angry, I'm upset, I can't deal with this, your brain believes it up to a point. And the proof of that comes from, if you ever go to a scary movie, you're watching that movie, it's not real. That alien is really not coming out of that person's chest. And yet your heart rate's elevated, you're seeing it, it's not real, but your brain perceives it somewhat as real. And so it's the self-talk so important. I can do this. Everything's going to be okay. Not, this is going to be a bad day. This is going to be a bad interview. So those sort of things are easy to learn. It's getting people to do it consistently. I just think that the more that we can do positive self-talk, the more that we can also encourage others, where somebody's having a bad day and you just come up to them and say, you know what I like about you? We give positive reinforcement too. I think the more we concentrate to do that, then, the NLP and psycholinguistics, the language of words, a lot of that is then the words we say. If you have an employee that's late all the time, you don't go, why are you late? The word why implies guilt. Mm-hmm. If you say, help me understand what's going on, you'll get a better response.
Amen.
So yeah, it's very simple things. As Britney Spears said, it's not rocket surgery. It's not complicated.
Exactly. And help me understand is one of my favorite phrases I've used throughout my career to get anybody to help me with something as well. But let's talk international. I've lived in other countries. Mm-hmm. I speak a few languages. I've spoken overseas. Thank goodness I never did any stand-up overseas, but language can be such an issue, as well as context and colloquialism, as you well know. But is it complicated to speak in other countries about the use of humor? Are the Germans going to laugh as much as the Brits will?
Well, the Germans come out, okay, joke number one.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's more than anything. I've spoken in Germany. When I go to those countries where I have to be interpreted, I'll go out a day before and work with them so that people understand what I'm talking about. First of all, humor doesn't translate well between languages. So you have a setup line, a punch line, and a punch word. The last word is the punch word. So let's say the punch line is, and then I went to the store. If you convert it to French, it would go to the store I went. It changes the order. And so the jokes don't work when they're in wrong order. So the first is translating jokes is hard. However, a cubicle in New York is a cubicle in Australia, is a cubicle in Germany. We stick with the commonalities. And then I research what things people have said in the past that cause problems. I was in Australia following a guy that used to play baseball, and he said, do you root for your team? He said that not knowing that's a slang word there for having sex. And so he'd go, come on, root for your team. And he said, mate, we root, and so that's why a lot of our peers don't like to go to other countries. I spend the time to learn where others have messed up, or, slang and things like that are going to get you in trouble. It's doing the homework. And and sometimes you're going to make mistakes no matter what happens. I used to tell a story every time I got on an airplane, I ordered Tang, and it makes everybody laugh. Well, guess what? In London, they didn't drink a lot of Tang when they were kids. And so when I told that joke, they all stared at me. And so you've got to learn. It just requires more preparation. Our friend Scott Friedman has built a huge business overseas in Singapore and different places, but he's adapted his humor quite well and knows what works and what doesn't work.
Well, oftentimes as speakers, I know we want to know that what we're teaching or talking about is implemented and continued for days and weeks and months. Insert whatever preferred time frame you've got. How do you go about thinking about that with humor and how a client or an audience can continue the funny, if you will, so that the good effects that you help bring out in a keynote or workshop continues beyond?
That's a great question. Success breeds success. That when they do things at work, people are more likely to continue them than if they fail. I hear a lot where people have contacted me later and said that their parts of their corporate culture has changed with the impact of the things that I've taught them. And that's really meaningful to me. But I think more than anything else, people are not going to go home and study what we talk about. They're going to accept it right now and make a change or not. And so humor helps people accept that. It kind of keep their minds open to it. And the results for I have people that have contacted me 10 years after I've been there and say, people still laugh about the big sweaty guy in the middle seat story or some of the other stories or things that I've told about how we need to let the little things go and do your dismount at the end of the day like a gymnast. So I guess that's it, is success breeds success. They'll try it. It works, changes the culture.
That's a great point. Cause we've got a lot of speaker friends and Hall of Fame speaker friends that they all say that once they've given a speech, then that speech gave a 1 bazillion% increase in their revenue. And some of it's true, some it's not. It's hard to measure though with humor. But it's such a great point about if it can just change the culture a lot, it doesn't necessarily even have to measure the number of laughs. It just being able to work with each other better and alleviate some of that stress is invaluable. I mean, it's immeasurable.
Well, just them consciously trying to make change is going to make a difference.
Absolutely.
I'm doing a program for the $1 Million Roundtable coming up. It's really one of the brass rings for speakers. And I'm going to tell them, that when somebody comes to insurance salesman or a wealth planning group, and they'll say, I think I can help you unless you're planning to retire tomorrow, or something that can lighten it up a little bit when they're talking to somebody that's nervous. Anybody can use this. It's just a matter of making sure that it adds to and doesn't distract from.
Great point. Well, Tim, I ask everybody who appears on A Shark's Perspective. I know you said also your wife was a diver. This could be humorous or not, but what is your favorite kind of shark and why? Do you have a favorite shark or prop shark?
I'm always been a great white fan. And I mean, from the days of Jaws and all of the things around that I've always been terrified of them. I guess since I watched Jaws, it scares me when Sophia goes swimming like that a lot, but I'm fascinated by the thought that there's an animal out there that does nothing but kill and eat and swim and make baby sharks and kill and eat and swim. It's like talk about your simple job. I know they don't sleep very much, but it's like, I got one, let's see, what do I do? Oh yeah, swim. I got to swim. I'll eat. I'm going to eat. It's a very uncomplicated life.
True. Well, Tim, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am.
All right. Number 1, props on stage. Which are better, funny glasses or hand puppets?
I would say funny glasses.
Why so?
Hand puppets. I think anytime you get hand puppets up, you're going to have people dealing with some real repressed memories, perhaps. I would say just the funny glasses can't go wrong. I don't have any repressed memories of those.
That's a great point. All right. I was looking through and I was thinking through a few different TV shows and movies and all kinds of things, but I got to a list because I was kind of scrolling through a Rolling Stone list. I thought you might appreciate these funny movies. Leslie Nielsen is in two of what I think are two of the funniest movies of all time. Would like your opinion on which one you think is the funniest, Airplane or Naked Gun?
Airplane changed the way people looked at humor in the movies, in my opinion. Naked Gun has a clientele. There's a real set group of people that really like that movie. I like it. But Airplane to me is one of the trendsetters in movies that really changed the nation. I think Airplane.
Agreed. But I will say that as a keynote speaker, you got to appreciate that Naked Gun had such a powerful reminder not to leave your microphone on
That's
when you
right.
go to the restroom and
That's
have
right.
to do number one.
That was too good. It was
That
too
was good. All right. Number 3, who in your mind performs the art of stand-up comedy better? Not the content. I'm not judging anything controversial of this, but Jerry Seinfeld or Dave Chappelle?
I would go with Jerry Seinfeld. I've spent a lot of time studying the fact that he will spend months trying to add or take away a one word for a joke. His ability to craft, a story is as long or as short as it should be. A joke is simple in its elegance. I just have always admired his ability as observational humor, but his ability to jokesmith, I think, is superior.
I'm so glad I asked you that, because that's the same thing I think with Jerry. And then the same thing with Dave Chappelle is how he does timing. And with humor, so much of it is about timing and the amount of words or limit of words to be able to tell a great story. It's great point. All right, number 4. So we talked about doing the presentations overseas, the international events you do. Who laughs more in general? Audiences in Europe or audiences in Asia?
I would say audiences in Europe, but the humor has to be smarter. It has to be more intelligent. Audience in Asia laugh, but they're almost always they give time. It's like it's not an immediate laugh. It's like if you ask a question of a group there, they give credence to the question by thinking about it. And I think it's the same way with humor, is they don't laugh immediately all the time. They give you the respect of having thought about it. So I would just say, I mean, that's a really interesting question, but I'd have to say from personal experience, it would be Europe.
Well, and I was also thinking about it as I came up with that question, because I'm an MMA fanatic. And whenever you watch MMA in audience, especially like Japan, whenever they're watching a fight, it's so quiet. But if they do an event in London, people are screaming and carrying on. Yeah. But then when the round is over or the event is over, Japanese are clapping as loud as everybody else. But the audiences are so measured and respectful. Yeah. I think your synopsis was spot on. All right. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, I got to go with cornbread. If you have to have gravy with the biscuits, or they're just really an exercise in futility. Cornbread in and of itself could be a work of art. So I'd have to go with cornbread.
Perfect. All right. So Tim, where can people find out more about you, learn more about what you're doing with humor, laugh at your jokes, keep up with your speaking and more?
www.timgard.com. I also do safety training, and that's stickysafety.com, just how it's spelled, all one word. But feel free to go on there. I'm on YouTube. I've got Vimeo, all kinds of things like that. You can email me, tim@timgard.com.
Tim, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Good to be here. I'll come back anytime you want, my friend.
So there was my conversation with Tim Gard, a certified speaking professional and a member of the Speaker Hall of Fame, who teaches people to be more resilient and resourceful and coaches businesses on how to enhance productivity and employee enthusiasm. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, Tim's an excellent speaker and very funny. On the podcast and on stage, he brings up a great point about using humor to shift people's perspectives. Sometimes you have no control over a situation, but that doesn't mean you have to get angry when something goes wrong. Depends on the situation, of course, and it doesn't always work. However, a lot of times finding a laugh, wherever it may be hiding, can help you look at what we cannot control a much different and better way. Second, we spoke about how leaders can develop a positive humor plan, and that ain't easy. Some leaders and bosses are not funny and way too rigid, but even they can add a humor plan to help make this impact. Tim says, find what works for you. Start small and start with the end of the boring meetings. I agree with that. Now, if we just get your manager to laugh a little bit. Third, as a speaker, I and all of us look to measure the success of a keynote or a workshop months later. A lot of speakers will tout that a company had a 200% increase in sales, for example, after one of their sessions. But measuring humor in the workplace isn't easy. Tim said that humor helps people make change, and success breeds success. And if they'll try it, then it works, and it will change the culture. That's hard to measure with smiles and laughs, but those smiles and laughs can be worth their weight in gold when measuring the positive impact to a team's culture. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I am so thankful to everyone who listens. And I will leave you with the immortal words of Dr. Seuss. From there to here and here to there, funny things are everywhere. And I hope that you will join us here on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.